Once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. I'm Daniel. Today, we're going to be going back into the Bryan Kohberger case. There's been some new documents that have been dropped in the last couple of days that we haven't discussed. And I think they're pretty telling as far as some of maybe perhaps of the defense's tactics that'll be coming up. Pretty telling, in my opinion, of a tactic that they've been doing. So we'll get into those things and more. I want to thank everybody that's tuning in. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. I also want to remind you guys of our partnership with DataSeal. If you have any questions or concerns about your personal information being out there, whether it's your name, address, phone number, or religious preference, voting preference, those type of things, check out DataSeal. They'll help get that stuff removed from the interwebs, and you get a 5% discount. With that being said, let's get into the show. All righty. So like I said, I've taken a couple of days off, mainly because I had to go to work. And I had to work extra this week in efforts to get some days off around the holidays so I don't lose any pay. It is what it is. So I had to work like 11, 12, 10 hours last night, something like that. I'm ready to go, though. Well, in that time that I was at work, there was a couple of motions that were dropped, and we're going to go through these, including an order referencing the Frank's motion that I think is very telling as well. So let's start off with, let's see, right here. So last time we had spoken, the state had stated that they wanted to basically, they wanted the court to deny the defendant's memorandum because it was like 37 pages instead of the 33 pages. Well, the court made their decision and they are denying that motion to strike the defendant's memoranda. It says here that the motion to strike defendant's memorandum in support of motion to suppress the genetic information and memorandum in support of Frank's hearing, November 20th, 2024. The state aptly points out that both memoranda violate Rule 8.1 of the 4th Judicial Local Rules, setting 15-page limit on the memorandum in support of non-dispositive motions. Defendant's memorandum are at issue are 37 pages and 33 pages, respectively. The defendant did not seek leave of court to file overlength memorandum, which is contemplated by Local Rule 8.3. So basically, what the judge said is no, we would have granted the extended memorandum if they had asked for it. It would have been granted, and so they're going to allow this. They didn't strike that motion down. However, and we'll go into the Frank's motion here. This is from the court. It says, before the court is the defendant's motion for Frank's hearing, November 14, 2024, and the memorandum in support of motion for Frank's hearing. Accompanying the motion are 38 exhibits comprising over 2,000 pages. Now, I know a lot of folks have been kind of looking at this and saying, wow, this Frank's motion hearing is a lot, when you look at other cases and how much information or how many pages they had, and those documents were significantly less, this must equate to a lot of supporting evidence for Bryan Kohberger. And not necessarily. And I think that this document goes into it pretty clearly. It states, unfortunately, the defendant's memorandum largely fails to identify with particularity the relevant portions of the exhibits. instead referring simply to the exhibit number without identifying the precise pages at issue. Thus, the court is left with the inevitable task of shifting through the pages and pages of largely irrelevant documents. Most of them are irrelevant. And so it sounds like these 2,000 pages, it's a bunch of fluff. Now, why would they do this? Do you think that it's out there so that they can, trick the viewers who are watching this case, or those that are creating content for this case, into thinking that they have quite a bit? Maybe. But more so, I think what the judge is identifying in here is that they're trying to leave it to the court to go through all the pages of mostly irrelevant documents and ascertain what portion of the defendant may be referring to. They're trying to do more stalling tactics. This is an event to stall. So they fluffed it up, put a bunch of crap in it, and said, all right, this is our motion for Frank's hearing. They're going to have to push this back. By the time they go through it, yada, yada, yada. Judge said no. All right, let's continue. The court is not required to search for the record for looking for evidence. So again, this is Ann Taylor wanting somebody else to do her job, right? She, when she complained largely about the evidence and some pictures or videos from certain places or whatnot, she mentioned that at the end of that hearing that those things were on a thumb drive and that it was at the evidence log, and she was requesting that the judge order the prosecution to go through all that evidence and basically tell them what they're going to be using and not using, and find the specific pieces of evidence amongst all their other evidence that isn't going to be used against Bryan Kohberger, just to stall even more. This is all just stall points. So consequently, if the defendant wants the motion to be considered, which he's still going to consider the motion, he's not denying the motion. He's denying the fact that they put 2,000 pages together of largely irrelevant documents. Identifying the relevant portions of the record by the page and line number referring to testimony for the facts asserted. In addition, defendant must resubmit his supporting exhibits to exclude portions that are not relevant to the motion. Because the state is under a deadline to respond, the court will allow the defendant to until Tuesday, November 26th, to submit the revised filings. And so that was yesterday. Now, I had noticed that there was a 1 here. All right, when it was referring to the exhibit number without identifying the precise page at issue. The footnote says, give me 1 second. The footnote says, by way of example, defendant cites generally to exhibit D9 for the proposition that law enforcement's vehicle expert felt more comfortable setting the date range of 2011 to 2013 for the Elantra. The exhibit is over 100 pages of duplicate emails. Defendant does not identify which email supports his proposition. The court will not do the counsel's job and scour through the exhibit to decide what portions the defendant must be suggesting support his assertion. Exactly. So this is the part where I had saw earlier that I was referring to when I said, again, the defense is stalling. They're wanting them to go through all this, try to figure it out. I really like this judge. In my opinion, he's holding it down. And so, but by this, let's talk about this. So one of their issues in the Frank's hearing, or one of their, I guess, pieces of evidence will be, so let me do my psychic thing. All right. Let me do my psychic thing. This is probably going to come true, just kind of like the other videos that we've had where I show I was right 5 months later, 4 months later. This is what they're trying to do. So what they're trying to say is that because the Elantra was a 2011 to 2013 and it wasn't changed, and they're using these emails to support when it was changed or when it was asked to be changed. It's probably around or just after the December 19th date when they got the IGG. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to say that if it not been for the IGG, they would have not been looking for Bryan Kohberger's car. The 2011 to they would have been focusing in on the 2011 to 2013 Elantra. This is more evidence that the IGG is what pointed them to Bryan Kohberger, which, to be honest with you, I said this already like a year, maybe even more ago. This isn't something that I haven't said before. As soon as Bryan Kohberger was arrested and we found out about the IGG, I put these things together and I said, the defense is going to be, hey, the IGG did is what brought them to the suspect, not these random acts of things. But where it hurts the defense is, did law enforcement ask? I mean, they were asking the public specifically, for vehicles like a 2011 to 2013 white Elantra. Now, on November 25th, that is when the WSU officer went out there, found the vehicle, and took down that information and then put it into their database of vehicles that they had, seen that could match the description of the vehicle that was out there. Now, if it didn't fit and it was a 2015, why go out there and document it? Unless they were told to look for vehicles that could match a 2011 to 2013 Elantra. And by putting in other vehicles, and this is the only vehicle that we're aware of, there could be others. What if they had also the 2019 Nissan Sentra that we knew they also thought that the vehicle was at one point? It could also be, a Corolla, a bunch of other things, a Sonata. They're probably going through all these white vehicles that could match this time frame. And because they were able to grasp and find Bryan Kohberger's car before his IGG came in, is proof, in my opinion, that they were looking for a type of vehicle, not necessarily a specific vehicle. But in the end, what they're trying to prove is that the IGG is what pointed them to Bryan Kohberger. That's what made them change their mind about the vehicle age. Thus, they lied because they said that the reason they got onto Bryan Kohberger was through the officer who had found his vehicle. I've said this for probably over a year now. For those that have been watching, you guys can attest. The problem with that is it doesn't matter what you know or what you've been told. It's what you can prove with the information and the evidence that you have and that's available to you. The IGG is inadmissible in court because it doesn't directly point to a suspect. It points to a person of interest, but it doesn't directly say Bryan Kohberger is the person whose this DNA belongs to. And the reason being is the IGG never tested the DNA on the sheath to Bryan Kohberger's DNA. They never had Bryan Kohberger's DNA. So they're pointing out a possibility. So because it's a possibility, it's not admissible. Now, because it's also a possibility, you can't go get a warrant based off that information. You can't say, all right, I'm going to go get a warrant for Bryan Kohberger's swab of his mouth because I'm using this inadmissible evidence. That doesn't fly. That wouldn't work. You have to come up with another means and another way to justify taking his DNA. Now, you go out there, you find him, you pull trash. It doesn't matter what pointed you into his direction. Did you pull the trash legally or did you not pull the trash legally? If they pulled the trash legally, which it's legal, pull the trash, and the DNA there that's from a discarded item that belonged to Bryan Kohberger's father ended up testing to the fact that the person's DNA on the sheath, or that the father or Mr. Kohberger was 99.998% the father of the suspect that left the DNA on the sheath. And so with that being said, that gives you your warrant to get his DNA. You have other things that give you his warrant to get the other stuff. Those are legal means of doing it. The IGG is not a new thing. It may be new in Idaho, but it's not a new concept. Many people have been arrested and convicted with the IgG being used and it not being used in court. You have to find another means of getting that information legally, which they did. You know, how they like it or not, or whatever the case may have been. So what? And when it comes to a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra, did the car morph when they said it was a 2011 to 2013, then they changed into when they said it was a 2015 to 2016 on the video somehow? Or is it still the same video? If it's still the same video that you had, do you have an expert that can say that that's a 2011 to 2013? Because what it sounds like is they're not denying the fact that the vehicle is possibly a 2015 or 2014 to 2016 Elantra. That's not their argument. They're not bringing up experts to say that. They're arguing when law enforcement thought to change that year, when they had the decision that it was a 2011 to 2016. What made them reevaluate the video to see if it was perhaps a newer model? That's their argument. It's not that it isn't, that it's exculpatory. It's not that it isn't his vehicle. It's not that it doesn't match his vehicle. Because if those were the case, that would be the argument. The vehicle doesn't match Bryan Kohberger's. Not that law enforcement figured it out on this date. Thus, they use the IgG. So, again, I don't see any of this being strong whatsoever. This all points to me of a weak case, an extremely weak case. If you're stalling to the point where you're wanting the prosecution to find your evidence and do your job, and you're hoping that the court will also do your job and figure out what you're trying to say with a bunch of paperwork that is largely irrelevant, that's not usually a sign of a strong case. If you have a strong case, you're going to want to go to court immediately. And you're going to want to prove that you have, that it couldn't have been you, or you have reasonable doubt or whatever. And I'm saying that's the difference between, I'm saying a strong case, not necessarily what you need to do to prove your innocence or be acquitted. That's the state's responsibility to prove guilt. But however, these tactics of stalling and continuing to stall and try to prolong this as long as possible, and not really coming up with experts anymore that are going to be arguing for the defendant's alibi or story or anything else. Because remember, and we'll pull this up real quick, and I know I didn't talk about it much last time, but these are the motions to suppress, which included Bryan Kohberger's cell phone data, the AT&T warrant, and his pen trace trap device to determine his location. I thought he had an expert that was going to prove he was at the Wawai Park and somewhere else. One, that expert was supposed to have already testified and he didn't. And two, if you have an expert that has exculpatory evidence, why are you trying to suppress him? Because by suppressing this information, you suppress your expert. Your expert's not allowed to go up there either. So I guess, in a sense, like, Cy said in the beginning during his testimony that he has the right to change his mind once everything came in. Sounds like he changed his mind. And so does that mean that Bryan Kohberger's weak alibi is now out the window too? I do. I think that this is very telling when you look at the motions against that Bryan Kohberger's team has brought up. The white Hyundai Elantra. Why would you suppress your biggest piece of reasonable doubt, right? The doubt there is that if he committed 4 murders with a knife in close proximity, if there's no DNA in the car, that would be, could be considered exculpatory. It doesn't mean that it 100% is. There's been other cases where DNA wasn't found, where you thought there should have been found. People have, gone to certain lengths to protect themselves from getting DNA on themselves. or keeping DNA on themselves and leaving DNA behind. There was that one case in New York, I believe, where a guy drove 3 hours, took his father's life with an axe as he stood over him, hit his mother with the axe as well. But she survived. Both of them were struck in the head. Tons of blood everywhere, and the guy left, drove 3 hours back, and had no DNA in his car, from no blood or any of that stuff. What I ended up finding out is that he was a vet. He worked at a veterinarian office where they did surgeries on animals, and he had access to clothing and material that would protect one from getting hit by blood or stuff like that, during an operation. And so those things have happened. But in this scenario, if you don't have that, right, if you do not have no DNA in there, why would you want to suppress that? They also mentioned that there was no evidence of lack of DNA or whatever. Some folks, including myself, took that as maybe they didn't find evidence of a cleanup job. But knowing how Ann Taylor has used words, since, and what she calls exculpatory and what she doesn't, things of that nature, I just, I'm cautious on the things that she said in the past. Even the part where she said that he was an innocent man. Remember, that was in Latah County, right here in front of Judge Hippler and Ada. What was it? He's an innocent man right now. So just interesting things that they're saying. Interesting things. And so, but why would you throw away that? Especially if there was nothing found, like no evidence of the victims, no nothing. Why would you want to have the white launcher thrown out if it's exculpatory to your defense? Unless it's not. All right. I'll take a couple questions, guys. This one will probably be a shorter show. Unless you guys have lots of questions for me or comments, put a couple stars on there. If you're a member, put a couple stars on your questions. I will answer every member question. Sirius Black comes in gifting 5 DT show memberships. Thank you so much, Sirius. And if you ask questions before, I haven't seen them. I'm not going to go back up, so please ask them again. Yes. Congrats to everybody that joined. Congrats. But yeah, overall, I just think that these motions are just not looking good for Bryan Kohberger. I would be more surprised if these motions end up getting dropped, right? If the judge denies the motion to suppress on all these counts, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of plea, man. I mean, you're throwing out everything. They're claiming that there was no DNA in the car, but they're trying to throw out the car's DNA. They try to say that there was no evidence in the apartment or in his parents' house. Yet they want to throw out those pieces of information. I mean, those would be, in my opinion, somewhat exculpatory, right? Hey, there's no evidence from the Richard Allen case tried to use it. They tried to say there was no evidence of anything when it came to Richard Allen, no DNA evidence with each other or anything like that. So why not use that to your benefit? Placed, insinuating someone planted evidence. Yeah, I think that's what was said early on about the about certain things that they were placed there. Daniel, we haven't seen footage from 1112 house. I would believe it could be real telling. I've seen a screenshot from that night, from that from that camera. Let me see if I still have it real quick. And there's a lot of stuff that's in there that is real telling. You're absolutely right. Let me see. I'm not sure if I still have it. I have quite a bit of stuff. I'm pretty sure I do. I just have to go through quite a bit of stuff to find it. Okay, it's not on that one. Well, I have folders on top of folders of everything in here, and then including a zip file that has quite a bit. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it, but yeah, you can see the King Queen Road intersection in that image. And one thing that I've been able to deduce is because I think a lot of people have been wondering, was there a camera facing the front of the victim's house, the 1122 residence? And a lot of people were saying, well, maybe because in the PCA it says that he tries to park or do a 3-point turn. And I got to thinking about it, and we have the Linda Lane footage, which I believe what you see is real. The audio aspect, I don't know, but I think the visual part, yeah, I think majority of the audio is real as well. I know that some people had manipulated certain things to make some stuff sound like there were things in the background, but I think that when you hear the vehicle and the vehicle moving around and it's turning its wheel and stuff like that, I think that those things are very real, and those sounds are very real. But in that area, when you look at the PCA and you look at that image, you can see the lights coming when it's going up the side of the apartment complex towards Linda Lane, and then as it turns and it goes away, you can still see the light. And so I wonder if maybe perhaps that same camera that's pointing at the King Queen Road intersection, if they saw that Linda Lane footage, they would have known that the white Elantra was heading back, and then they would have seen, the headlights reflect off of the other buildings and homes in the area, and the way that the vehicle is moving, or the headlights are moving, would suggest that he was either trying to park or make a 3-point turn, not necessarily that they actually saw the front of the house. I know I've asked Miss Goncalves about that, and she said that none of them have seen a video of the front of the house or anybody taking the dog out or anything like that. I know that there was a interview where Olivia said something to that, and I think that what was meant in that statement was that they believe that she would have done something like that, but they didn't know for sure. And she flat out told me they have not seen any video of the front of the house or the victim's house at all. And so that made me believe, now that I'm looking at everything, that, and you go look at the Linda Lane footage, you can see the headlights coming in the distance, that they probably don't have footage of the front of the house on the of the King Road residence, which is why they didn't know which way he came in. They couldn't figure out how he got into the house, whether it was the front door or the back door. I know that when they got to the scene, that the back sliding glass door was still open, and they suspect that's how he entered. I think there's a suspicion that once he entered the building through the back sliding glass door, that he left that door open. He never touched it again. And I think that if he did that, that's in an attempt to not leave DNA. The more times you open it, or if you're coming back from being exerted, or you're after doing the crime and your energy is out, you're probably sweating, you're probably doing some other things that might leave some DNA behind. And so you don't want to have to open the door again to get out, leaving potential DNA of your own there at the crime scene. And so leaving the back sliding glass door open the entire time makes sense to me. It's probably what ended up alerting Xana. I think that she probably either heard what was going on, maybe felt the draft of the back sliding glass door being open, came around the corner, saw that the glass door was open, maybe even heard what was going on upstairs, and said, I think someone's here. If you go around the corner and you see your glass door open, I think you might, and you're hearing something upstairs, maybe just walking, or I don't know what she was hearing at that point. It sounds like that was after when Dylan said she heard that somebody say, I think someone's here. If that were to be Xana, she would have had to have been pretty close to her bedroom to have said that for Dylan to have heard that. I don't think she would have said that from her room, and she would have been hearing it as clear, which is why she probably thought it was Kaylee, given the distance and how loud the voice was. Probably not thinking that it would be Xana down the hall. And but I think that sound or that question came after the dog was, or what she thought was Kaylee playing with the dog. So my theory has always been that she came around the corner, saw the back sliding glass door open, said, I think someone's here, turned around to go back, and then was surprised before she entered, or as she entered into her bedroom, to tell Ethan, who was still asleep at that point. And so, that's my personal theory. I think that it matches everything that we've heard so far, but I could be wrong. I wasn't there. I don't know all the information, but it just kind of makes sense to me. But I do think that one piece of camera that is there is going to be very telling as far as the vehicle. I think that's where you can determine that there isn't a front license plate. It's going to be hard to see inside the car. I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, it must be tint. It must be tint. His car's not as tinted. I've already seen people trying to look at Bryan Kohberger's former traffic stops and determine if you can see inside the car or not. And one thing I informed them was that glass is pretty reflective, and if it's dark out, it's going to reflect it's going to be a dark reflection. It's going to be hard to see inside the car, especially if there's no lights inside. Doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have tint or no tint. It's almost impossible to tell at night unless you have a flashlight or headlight beaming into the windows. You can't tell, not from a camera like that. But I do think it's going to be very telling. Yes. Do you think Thompson would even offer a plea deal? I do. Well, maybe not. I mean, if they have this much evidence against them, maybe not. Now, maybe perhaps Kohberger can offer. I mean, you have to offer something that they'd want, or they would be okay with. Like if he committed other crimes and he wanted to, discuss those other crimes and stuff like that maybe he's committed in the past, then there might be some sort of plea for that. Perhaps if. I think BTK had a hearing where he had to explain everything that he did and why or how. I don't know if you get closure for something like that, or you want to rather hear that versus, him being served justice to the full extent. I'm not sure, but I don't know. Now I think at first I would have said, yeah, I do. But given the amount of information or evidence that the defense is wanting to suppress, it just kind of screams to me that they may want one. Was any DNA found in the car? The car was so cleaned well, his dad's DNA wasn't even in the car. Theory. I don't know if we saw something that said that. I think that was a rumor that they couldn't find anybody's DNA in the car. And maybe perhaps that was, on the surface of things. There could be an opportunity where Bryan Kohberger missed something that had to be waited until the lab got a hold of it and really did a deep dive into the evidence. But if there was no DNA in the car, why would they want to throw out the car? There would have to be something in there that's damning that would make them say that it's not worth saying there's no DNA in the car to bring in this information. And so we looked at the warrants at what they grabbed, and I mean they had documents in there. Unless those documents were a blueprint or plans or like a manifesto of some sort talking about his actions, then I don't see why he would want to have that not in. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. Let's see. Looks like the defense has one big nothing burger. I agree. I mean, the more that this has gone longer, the less likely I think that I think everything has been settled. I don't think they have anything anymore to stand on. One of the things that you risk when you stall as much as you do is you do risk the fact that the state can build a better case against their client. For instance, the 3 unknown DNA samples. I'd be pretty sure to guess that those aren't unknown anymore. In fact, I think that the prosecution mentioned that they did the DNA work in a hearing in Layton County. So there's that. They also had Cy Ray, who wasn't sure if Bryan Kohberger was, at the crime scene, or if he was in Walleye Park or wherever he was. That could have been used then as well, but now they want to suppress his information that he has, apparently. So, or his information isn't as strong as the information that they're going to get from the cell phone. For instance, you know how I mentioned that the PCA is irrelevant, or people keep saying the PCA is irrelevant and that means something. It don't mean anything. One of the things that I talked about was the cell phone pings. I was like, how are the cell phone pings relevant if, you need them for the warrant, right? You need it for a warrant to get his phone and to check for the GPS on the phone. So you need that for that part. That's where it's relevant, the PCA. It's not relevant now because I'm assuming you have these GPS coordinates. And so maybe perhaps those GPS coordinates that are a lot more accurate are saying a different story than what Bryan Kohberger is alluding, and different than what Cy Ray thinks the pings mean. And if that ends up being the case, then you don't want to just throw out the GPS. If you did that, if you say, hey, we want to throw off the GPS from the phone, which pen trap device could be that itself. But if they're able to get the warrant for the phone pings thrown out, then that could potentially get everything else thrown out after it, which may include the GPS stuff. And so now that I think of it, it may not be a situation where Cy Ray thinks it's different. I think that could be a possibility. But the other thing as well is, given what we should get out of this when it comes to things like GPS, I think even Ann Taylor mentioned the word gladiator, which was what was used, I believe, in the Murdaugh case. And those things have an accuracy of like 1 meter. And so very different than the cell phone pings, which is why the cell phone pings wouldn't be used in court. You would use the GPS stuff. So that could be the reason why, now that I think about it. But even at that, well, if they would have gone to court earlier, they still would have had to have fought the GPS regardless, because that's what they were going to use. And so that's why they were arguing so hard about the phone pings. They wanted to get the phone pings thrown out so that way they can't use the GPS against Bryan Kohberger. Pretty sure that's what's going on here. It's irrelevant. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Let's see. Oh, nice. Sirius coming in again with another 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. Thank you, Sirius. Amazing. We appreciate you. Yes, everybody have a great Thanksgiving tomorrow. I hope everybody has a safe one. Don't get too rowdy with your family. I was in law enforcement. Thanksgiving usually was a day that we got called out quite a bit because of family members not getting along. It's just let's stay safe. Stevie says, Daniel, why are you so triggering to the Burger Buddy crowd? They are absolutely psycho when it comes to you. Because I'm right and they can't prove it. Because everything I say makes sense. And I basically debunk majority of what they say. And I get some of the suspicion behind certain things, but when it comes to logic and reasoning about this, it's pretty obvious in my opinion. Also, I think that they don't like the fact that I say he's guilty or whatever. That's my opinion. I'm not a judge. I'm not on any legal side. I'm not I'm not a person who's going to be. I'm not a jury. So that's my opinion. He's guilty of sin. Just some people don't know it yet. But yeah, no, I've heard some of the people get real sensitive when it comes to my shows. And the thing is, I don't rarely bring them up in mine. In fact, I don't, for the most part. I had one loser who who I was referring to the other day because he likes to fight with women. You know, he started arguing and calling my wife certain things and other women on his channel just because nobody watches him anymore. And yeah. Outside of that, I don't bring up anybody because you guys aren't here to hear or see the Kohberger tears. Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here for, you know, you're not here for me to talk about anybody else's channel. We're here to talk about this case and how it makes sense. Now, we'll use their theories to break it down, see if there's any fact or logic behind them. And typically there's not. But yeah, that's why they don't like me. The 80s kid comes in. Question to the Kohbergers: is he innocent, or did they, in your imagination, violate his rights to catch him? Can't be both. That's 100%. 100%. And nothing screams innocence here. Nothing at all. All right. Heather comes in saying, good question. I do know many who think he's guilty, but got to the evidence improperly. And see, that's the other thing too. There have been people who have been acquitted of crimes who did the crime, right? Just like there's been people who've been found guilty who were innocent. It's happened both ways. Casey Anthony, O.J. Simpson. I mean, there's a lot of people that were acquitted. It doesn't necessarily mean just because you're acquitted that you're innocent, that you didn't do it. It just means that the state couldn't prove it beyond a burden of proof or beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's all that means. So, and if Bryan Kohberger were to get off on this, which I highly doubt, let me rephrase it. If the 0.05% of a chance that Bryan Kohberger gets off on this were to go through, the stars and Jupiter and everything else align, and the moon becomes bigger, and forces of nature change, and Bryan Kohberger becomes innocent, it's not because he didn't do the crime. It's probably because something was done wrong by the prosecution or law enforcement to obtain things. I don't see anything wrong. I haven't seen anything that screams, hey, this is something that you should look at. I don't see it here at all. You know, there was another thing that I saw in here that I wanted to bring up real quick, and that was the objection right here. So this was I mean, the prosecution thought this was going to be very simple, in and out. Hey, we want to use a special attorney general. Apparently, Ann Taylor and the prosecution have a problem with it. Now, I'm going to ask out there if anybody knows this, maybe perhaps people in the area. I've asked people that I've known, and they have no idea. But is it just me, or has anybody noticed that Bill Thompson hasn't been around since in a while, and that there's been other attorneys that have been speaking up? I'm not saying that something happened or anything like that, but I don't know. Did something happen? Did something go on that I'm not aware of? Does anybody know anything when it comes to Bill Thompson? I don't know. And this goes to where PKC was talking about, and this is what reminded me. With Bill Thompson involving the AG office for assistance, I believe he plans to go all the way. That is true. And Ann Taylor and the defense didn't want that to happen. So it says here, comes Bryan C. Kohberger through his attorneys on the record, object to the amended petition for an appointment of a special assistant attorney general filed November 19th. The grounds for this objection are that the state has not articulated good cause for the appointment. Idaho Code does not authorize multiple attorney generals, and Mr. Kohberger will be denied the right to a fair trial if the state is given the broad authority to appoint multiple special assistant attorney generals without any specification of who and how many, why. And they have a one there. Defense counsel reached out via email to the state to seek an understanding of the state's intentions. No response was provided. Well, this isn't. Why do they have to respond to you as to why they want to use have another attorney assisting? If Bill Thompson has no experience or very little experience prosecuting death penalty cases, now, I mean, and then again, I don't know, maybe perhaps, the defense does have to show why they want to use certain witnesses, but I don't know if they have an issue assigning more counsel to him. I don't know. But it didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal. They wanted to do this without a hearing. This could be another situation where they're trying to force a hearing in attempts to make this stall even longer. But yeah, special attorney Ann Taylor doesn't want any part of it. Let's see. I want to see if there's anything in here real quick that, just complaining that now they're going into another case and what happened in another case and why it was. It says here the authority sought in the proposed in court is that the Deputy Attorney General Jeff Nye and other Deputy Attorney Generals selected by the authority of the General Office be appointed a special assistant attorney general to assist with prosecution of this case. This language, when coupled with the explanation in the petition and letter that accompanied the petition, is to grant Mr. Nye or his designee carte blanche authority to choose assigned deputy attorney general as may be appropriate. The authority sought in the petition and draft order is without any rational or good cause and is beyond the scope of the authority set forth in the statute for a attorney. You have more than one attorney, Miss Taylor. I mean, there's quite a few that go up and back and forth for you, and you've asked for them on a couple of occasions as well, and you were given to them. I don't understand how a different attorney general going up there changes the evidence, changes anything. How Ann Taylor plans on, trying her case or defending her client. I don't know. And WMW says, I think it will go to a plea deal right at the last minute. That's how these cowardly little men usually roll, in my opinion. Yeah, he don't look. He's starting to look a little bit more scared. In my opinion, his eyes are a little bit bigger. Now that he's in Ada County, he just still don't show much emotion, but there's a certain effed up kind of look to him when he's there getting in, hearing Judge Hippler and how things are going for him. The AG office is always involved with a death penalty case, 100%. So Kohberger's motive is that he was a jealous incel. That's kind of hard to swallow. I don't think I ever said he was an incel. You look at let's look at the evidence, right, Mr. Stevenson? The evidence is that you have a camera that picks up audio from 50 feet away that picks up whimpers. Doesn't pick up the sound of rage, a man losing his mind, whether it's from roids or from love struck. We have a person that drives by multiple times. That's not also typically a sign of rage or those type of things. You have the means, right? It was, from what I understand, the only DNA that they found inside of the house from the assailant was on the knife sheath. So are we to believe that somebody that is raging out is going to go in there and calculate and be calculated in his efforts and commit the perfect crime? I don't think so. I mean, this sounds more like, just based on that information alone, this sounds more like a thrill. This sounds more like a serial killer type of thing. Somebody that has not necessarily stalked the persons, but kept an eye on the house, seen the movements in and out, and then methodically go in there and very carefully and with experience to and knowledge of not how to leave your DNA behind at a crime scene, which Bryan Kohberger has. I mean, there's the means behind this. Somebody has to be able to commit this. And I don't think that we're seeing just drunk college kids on roids or love drunk. College kids are going to be doing this. Bryan Kohberger was a little bit older. He had a PhD. He's been to forensic classes at DeSales University. So you have that aspect. Then you have his his communications as of recent. He went on Reddit and he was talking with individuals who had committed crimes, and he was asking them specific questions about, you know, their motive, their feelings, how, why, who they choose, stuff like that. And I don't think it's hard to believe that when you have somebody like Bryan Kohberger, who has had a history of, you know, in his own words, not having remorse, thinking that people were a sack of potatoes or meat bags or whatever they were called, and having no feeling or remorse, and they start talking to other people who have committed these type of crimes. Those are typically people who have no feelings or remorse. He's probably finding a connection to them. Like, hey, I feel this way. I think that way. And perhaps this was something more about, you know, feeling, knowing what it was like, maybe perhaps trying to capture what others have felt. You know, there's a lot of consistencies with other serial killers here. You know, the location, there was an unsolved murder that happened in Pullman that ended up being, some believed, was Ted Bundy's first kill. Now, whether or not Ted Bundy was or not Joyce LePage's murderer, did Bryan Kohberger think that? And if Bryan Kohberger thought that that was a possibility, you know, for sorority, I mean, going into a house of sorority students, you know, I'm not sure if he knew that Ethan was going to be there or not, but what he probably did know was that 5 girls lived in that house at one point. And so I think the motive there isn't necessarily incel. I think there's clear evidence to kind of show the feelings behind the person. And I know you might say, well, I know these people who don't have feelings, they don't go and kill anybody or any of these things. And that may be true, but it's not so much that everybody that has these lack of feelings become a serial killer. It's the fact that most serial killers fall into this category where they have the lack of remorse and stuff like that. It's kind of like when I tell people, and this was on a test actually for to be a federal agent. The questions were similar to everybody in the Border Patrol speaks Spanish. Does everybody that speaks Spanish in the Border Patrol? No. So kind of the same scenario here, that he also has something in his past that not necessarily proves, but that shows that he also lacks the remorse aspect. This is another clue as to if Bryan Kohberger could have been the person that committed this crime. Did he have lack of feeling and remorse? And the answer is, according to himself, yes. I think when you look at the evidence and you look at all that in his past, I think it's pretty clear what he was trying to do. Stephen comes in with a $10 super chat. Wouldn't Thompson take the family's wishes for sentencing over consideration to a certain extent? Yes, I would say that's true. But the families were very open about not knocking down the house, and that didn't change anything when it came to Bill Thompson's decision to do that. And so I think they probably are going to talk to him if that ever came about, explain to him what their thoughts of what they're going to do. But I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. But maybe. I mean, it's maybe. Thank you for your donation there, Stephen. We appreciate you. Let's see. The closer they get to trial date, the confidence of the defense has diminished, especially with the new judge. Just my opinion. When people commit heinous acts, you can see it in their eyes, chilling. Yeah. What was Kohberger jealous of, Christy? So I'm just because Christy said that he was jealous of something doesn't necessarily mean that's true. I mean, she's not a detective. She wasn't involved. She doesn't have Bryan Kohberger's medical records or background. You're taking the words of a victim who's emotional, a victim's family member out of emotion, and trying to use its weight as gold. The thing is, was he jealous of people? I don't know. But do I think that he committed this crime out of thrill? I'd say that the evidence points in that direction. Ken says, in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. Yeah, I'm not a trial, my man. This isn't a. I'm not sitting on a bench up here. I don't have a jury to my right. I don't have Bryan Kohberger to my left and the defense team there, and I'm just saying, oh yeah, he's guilty. Yeah, that's true for court, But you know that when an officer makes an arrest, they think that the guy's guilty. That's before any trial or any of those things. They believe that the person committed the crime that they are accused of. So why can't we believe that Bryan Kohberger is accused of the crime, that Bryan Kohberger did the crime that he was accused of? Why must we come up with bull BS statements to say that he's innocent when that's not what innocent until proven guilty is? Innocent until proven guilty isn't saying, all right, well, this must have been a frame job because he's innocent right now. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That's not what that is. What that means is that he should not be punished as if he was guilty. So his life has not been taken, as that is what the punishment would be for this crime. And a lot of people, and this is why when I say like 2 + 2 is 4, for me, I can figure that out in my head. I don't need to see it on a paper. I don't need to count my fingers. Some people do. Some people need to see it on paper. Some people need to count their fingers. But just because I do it in my head and I don't have to show my work because I can figure this out, doesn't mean I'm wrong. Right? You can do the work. You can see it, just like in this case. I can tell by the motions and everything that is going on because I am familiar with cases and I am familiar with how court proceedings work. I can see what's going on here. It's very obvious. It's blatant. Others may not. They want to wait till court to see the evidence. And some people not only want to see the evidence, but they want to have it explained to them. There's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't mean that the person that can take all the information in and create an opinion based on the evidence that's there. Like, I don't need to see everything to know that this guy did it. Some people need to see everything. That's what it is. And in court and in trial, that's what the state has to prove. But this isn't the courthouse of DT. Oh my gosh. Appreciate the support there, my man. Coming in and giving a comment. Shay says, hi, Dan. Hey, how's it going, Shay? Good to see you. Good to see you. So I might, as on our Discord, and this is for our members only. So members only, if you become a member, you'll have access to the Discord. It's going to be in the playlist. I mean, on the playlist, in the community tab, it'll have a link to it. I'll put a new one in there a little bit after the show. But we've had quite a bit of a discussion when it comes to the Karen Reed case. Now, that case is going to be starting here pretty soon. And I think I'm going to go ahead and start covering this case. I didn't cover it the first time around. I was quite busy and just couldn't. I tried to listen to one of the hearings, just didn't work out. And so since then, I have heard quite a bit of information. I've seen quite a bit of stuff from that happened in court and in trial, to the point where I have myself an opinion. My opinion is very, very lax right now, where it can go one way or the other. But it's going to take some evidence for me to kind of change where I'm sitting at on this case right here. I will say I'll probably lose some subscribers with my opinion, but I'm for what's truth and honest. If somebody committed a crime or didn't commit a crime, and if the police are shady or not shady, I'm gonna call it out. In fact, I think I did an entire show of this one guy who's a police officer who got caught talking on the phone about an accident that had occurred with another officer, and how they were going to they had like a price tag on her. They said that she was worth X amount, and just saying some derogatory things. I don't believe that they should be officers anymore. Just like I don't think that the officers in the Karen Reed case that were investigating and or involved should be officers anymore either. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything or everyone is innocent just because you have some bad apples. So we'll go through the evidence. We'll go through everything else in that case, and we'll talk about it. And I'll give you guys my opinion on why I think one way or another. I look forward to opposing opinions, as long as they're respectful, and we can have a constructive conversation about it. Because at the end of the day, I do not know everything about this case. When it comes to the Karen Reed case, I do know a little bit, but not everything. And so if there is something that I don't know, I am open to hear it. That way I can add it to my opinion. But I just wanted to throw that out there for the members if they want to check on that. Let's see. Any more? We'll be calling this a show here in a sec. I heard he was there on Zoom too. Not sure if there's anything going on, but even if it's not Thompson trying the case anymore, I'm sure the state has many more competent people who can handle it. 100%, 100%. If he's there on Zoom, he's probably have, given the fact that he's a prosecutor in Latah County, he's probably got some other stuff that's preventing him from going down to Ada County and being there in person. So if he is on Zoom, that does make sense. That makes sense quite a bit. Maybe this case is so obvious Bill Thompson has to play the guitar now. Oh, that was hilarious. Let's see. We have another $10 super chat. Daniel, bringing back Fear the Beard, aka Brett Kiesel days. 100%, 100%. So I'm letting it grow out. It's let me pull this out. So then this grow out. It's I stopped shaving at the maybe the first week, half of the second week, maybe in October. And I was like, me and the wife and our daughter were going to dress up for Halloween, and I was going to be we're going to do the Wizard of Oz theme, and I was going to be the lion. And so I wanted to grow a little bit of a facial hairs to add to the mane, so to speak. And that happened, and I was like, you know what? Let me see what happens until Christmas. It's pretty long right now. It's getting all the way down to my collar, but and I'm not really liking it. I'll be honest with you guys. It makes me look like chunkier. And so I'm gonna do it till Christmas just because I made my mind that that's what I was gonna do. Maybe even the first of the year, and depending on how it looks in the next month, will determine if I do it even longer. But yeah, it's getting there. It's a couple inches long now. So hopefully to get to that point where it's not in that ugly stage very long. Let's see if there's any more super chats or questions from members. Expo says, Idaho 4 was a copycat crime. Ted Bundy's FCU attack. There's a lot of coincidences or similarities there. After Bundy, I think he took the life of somebody in Washington, and then after that, he traveled through the Grand Tetons to Colorado, which is also, I think, the same path that Bryan Kohberger took when he was going home to Pennsylvania, that apparently him and his father had an argument about. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of similarities there. Perhaps he was somebody who idolized them. If he ended up burying his kill kit, which I think maybe have been the case. That sounds like Israel Keys. BTK took the life of 4 people the first time he began to start his murderous career, allegedly. He may have started earlier. There's so many things that people aren't aware of what he had committed throughout his time as a serial killer. But he started at the age of 28, killed a family of 4 inside their own house. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities here. Definitely. And did he, take in these killers who had gone away with it for so many years and maybe perhaps try to build something around it. Maybe. I mean, Joyce LePage, her body was found at Wawawai Park Canyon, in that area where Bryan Kohberger said he was during the murders. And it was speculated that it was Bundy's first kill. Now, whether or not it was, I know some people are going to come in here saying it's not Bundy's, and that doesn't matter if it was Bundy's or not. Did Bryan Kohberger think it was Bundy's? And if it was, what does that say about his alibi that he now wants to get this stuff thrown out when it comes to the cell phone data, that he's claiming he was at the location of potentially Ted Bundy's first murder victim during the murders on November 13, 2022? I think that says something. I mean, I think that's a pretty big slap in the face to people, in my opinion, to law enforcement, prosecution. I'm not familiar if his mother was obsessed with Bundy or not. I know that she was obsessed with like the Bald Day thing and other shooting events that occurred. And she talked about it and did something on it, but Bundy, maybe. You know what? I think you're right. I think she mentioned something about that Bundy shouldn't be put to death, that shouldn't have happened regardless of anything. Something like that. You might be right on that. Hey, what's going on, 12 gauge? Good to see you. Let's see. Just want to make sure I don't see anything that people were asking directly to me before we call it a show. Alrighty. Steph's asked, he only went for one person. The others were collateral, not a copycat, but Ted Bundy similarities. Yeah, that's possible. I mean, when you look at what you can see visually from the street behind the residence, it's Maddie's room. I mean, you can be parked back there. Even Enan Harsh, who said that he had seen a white Elantra parked back there on several occasions, and that the reason he knew it was a white Elantra is because his ex-girlfriend drove one and he thought that she was stalking him. In fact, it was probably Bryan Kohberger stalking the victims. And from the angle of where he would have been at, Maddie's room would have been the one that you could see into, that you would be able to know he went straight up the stairs to that room. I think he went into Kaylee's room. I think that's what may have gotten the dog going at 4:17 a.m. I think that the dog may have heard some stuff, but when the door opened, started to bark, that's when the barking began. If he went into Kaylee's room thinking, not knowing that, the girl that was laying with Maddie was Kaylee, or perhaps was the person that was supposed to be in the next room, was checking to see if anybody was in there, or was he going in there to try to take the life of another person? And if he was going in there to take the life of another person, then that does kind of allude to perhaps he was just going room by room by room. Maybe perhaps he wanted to see if another person woke up and was alert and opened the door, saw the dog, heard Xana downstairs say, I think someone's here, and go downstairs and attack Xana and Ethan as before he heads out. It's possible. I mean, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if his intent was one or all or two or anything else. Just the evidence that we know of points to this being a thrill kill. At 4:17, it seems likely that the perp had already proceeded to the second floor. Yep. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And, he goes into Xana's room. 2 minutes is a long time to be in a situation. I mean, a lot of people think of time as going super fast. Go. Now 1 minute has passed. That's not how it works. It's like 2 seconds. It don't take a long time. I would encourage people to get their watch walk from the back of their house to the front of their house at a quick pace, and see how long it takes you to do that. Probably about 4 to 5 seconds. You know, it's maybe a little bit longer than that. I mean, what is it? Like most people's homes. I know I did it with my house, and I think it was something like, my house is pretty long though. It's like 100 feet. Yeah, it didn't take me very long I think that's what, like 30 yards. So it took me like 7-8 seconds to cross that. No way. It's going to be long. October 12th, U of Idaho showed Scream. Was BK there? Were the students there? That's interesting. I didn't know that, Jen, that on October 12th, the U of I showed Scream. But I don't think so, because I think that the night before the incident, October, not November. Maybe. But Halloween was just out, you know, and when this first happened, I told the guys, I was like, man, the movie Halloween just aired. The guy's in a jumpsuit, large knife. And maybe this is a guy that saw the movie and was inspired or something like that. And we find out the Dickies jumpsuit, large knife. It's not a kitchen knife, but a large knife. He wears a mask. It may not be a Halloween mask, but it's at least one that covers his mouth and nose. Pretty crazy coincidence there too, right? Let's see. Yeah, because I think he was seen driving off like at 420 at a high rate of speed on Williams Drive, which is literally a couple blocks away. And driving at a high rate of speed probably took him like 20 seconds to get there. I think I even found the camera that may have captured him leaving at a high rate of speed on Williams Drive. It was literally right behind the victim's house. And yeah, it shouldn't take that long. So in there from 417 to 419 or even 420-ish, that's 2 to 3 minutes. That's a long time. I mean, I remember one time I got into a scuffle with like 3 people when I was in law enforcement. Called for backup, and it was on. I mean, there was nothing else I could do. I had to defend myself. This was a guy. What happened was I was driving and I saw this guy pop his head out between 2 cars. It's probably like 3 or 4 in the morning. So I popped a U-turn because I had just passed, and when I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw the head pop out between the cars, and somebody was hiding between them. So I busted a U-turn, went around. As I'm pulling up and I'm slowing down, the guy stands up and he just starts walking out into the street. And I walk out there with him. I say, "Hey, man, what's going on? You know, looking kind of weird there. Like you're hiding there in between these cars or underneath of them. Everything okay?" The guy was clearly under the influence of something. Eyes were dilated, red, smelled of alcohol and other things. And I noticed that the guy balled up his fist. And I told him, "Hey, man, calm down." And I was like, I need to get your identification. Who are you? He's not answering any question that I'm saying. And then, boom, he turns to swing on me. I duck. I grab him. I've done some mixed martial arts training and things of that nature. And so I was able to put him on the ground fairly quickly. And I called for, I look up and I see these like 2 or 3 people running towards me. So I called for backup. And it took them about a minute to get there, and it just felt like it was forever. Like it was freaking forever. And then I saw the cars turn around the corner with the lights and the flashing coming towards my direction. And that's at that point where some of them dispersed. I'd arrested 1, 2 the other guys had gotten away, but were caught by the other officers shortly after. So they all got arrested. Yeah, I held my own in that one. Didn't even pepper spray anybody. Just put the guy on the ground, cuffed him up, put another person on the ground, and had one cuff on that person. Couldn't let go of them because if they swing that at me, that's a deadly weapon, and I have to use force, which I didn't want to do. And so I held on to that one, and then The other guys were a little bit far behind. Apparently there was like a party or something, but I think they were trying to break into one of the houses where I was close to, because somebody came around the corner real quick and the other two guys came around. One was a lady, came around the corner from a distance. And so I think there was a party in the distance, but I think these group of dudes were doing something kind of shady over here. So ended up catching them all, arresting them, and calling it a show. But man, I think it was like 2 to 3 minutes that I was in the fight there with them, and it felt like an eternity. It really did. When you're in that type of situation, and that's not the only time I was in a situation like that where I was outnumbered, or me and another officer were outnumbered by a lot and got into a crazy situation. Time goes real slow in those scenarios, real slow. Let's see. Serious Black says, great his video, 9 minutes is hell of a great video to show just how much time he had to commit this crime. Check it out if you have. I haven't checked it out. If that's something about him going into the house, yeah, I haven't seen it. If it's the driving around aspect and putting the timeline there, giving the amount of time that he had, we did something similar too on our show. I haven't seen his, but we did a mapping as well. What I will say is, and because a lot of people tell me, oh man, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, it's not a long time to kill 4 people. In Australia, not too long ago, I think it was like in April, there was a guy who took the life of 6, stabbed 18 in a matter of like 15, 16 minutes. And I think about 13 minutes of that was him running for the police. I'm telling you guys, and his victims weren't asleep in the middle of the night under the influence of alcohol like Bryan Kohberger's victims were. Doesn't take that long. Does not take that long. Let's see. Have I watched Michelle? I have no idea who that is. Is that a creator or a case? I'm not sure who that is. 9 minutes of hell. Yes, ma'am. 100%. Yeah, 9 minutes is a very, very long time. I mean, how long does it take for one person to make one swing? Let's think about that. You can try this right now. Swing, bring it back. How long did that take? How long would it take to make 8 swings of a knife? Not very long. Not very long. A couple seconds. And so, yeah. Daniel, did you know that Ted Bundy also hiked? I did not know that. That's interesting. That is interesting. How's it going, Tumbleweed? BK took kickboxing for years. He knew how to strike vital organs. That's true. That is true. That is true. Daniel, did you ever have to discharge your weapon in the course of duty? No, I came close once. One day I was at work and I was on lunch break and I was with my daughter, my oldest daughter at the time. She was fairly young. She was pretty curious about my weapon. And so I took it out and I unloaded it and I showed it to her and, talked to her about the safety of it. And then after lunch, I put my weapon together, went about my business, get to a call where there was like a fight in progress. We show up. This dude had like these razor blades, like in between his fingers, like he was Wolverine or something. And he was swinging at people. I think he had cut up his brother. I think this is like a family thing too. And, the guy was crazy. And pulled my weapon on him and I said, hey man, drop the knives or the razors and get on the ground. And he said no, and he started walking towards me and I'm like, dude. I started to walk backwards and I was like, drop it and get to the ground. And he kept coming at me. I was like, I will shoot you. He came at me again, or came towards me another step, and I pulled the trigger on him. Unfortunately, I fortunately, let me put it that way, for him and me, I don't want to go through that. I didn't put one in the chamber. I racked it. He noticed that I was willing to do it, dropped the blades and went down to the ground. So that was the only time that I ever came somewhat close. I've been shot at a couple of times, but one of them was a scenario where we were shot at from a distance. This was near the border, and it was coming from across the border. Another time was where I was doing a traffic stop, and it ended up being a guy who had taken his, well, he was an older guy. He's like 30 or so, and his girlfriend was like 16. And they stole the girlfriend's dad's car, and were trying to hightail from up north to the Mexican border. They got to our town, and I ended up pulling them over because there was a report that they were seen somewhere, and that he had a gun in his waist. And so when I went out there to make contact, I saw him entering the vehicle, and I pulled him over. And as I'm walking to the vehicle, he takes off. I get in my car, chases on, and he shot out his window a couple of times towards us as we headed off to the outside area of town. We ended up having a standoff with the guy for quite a while, but in the end, he found himself in the hospital with a gunshot to his shoulder. It was not me that discharged that gunshot. I was not in position, nor did I have the weapon at the time to make a shot from that distance. It was somebody else. And so he was airlifted, taken to a hospital, and from what I remember, he survived. DPS ended up handling a lot of that case because it was way out in the outside of town, and truth be told, it was a trooper who ended up taking that shot. So yeah, we just had to do a lot of supplements and stuff. I'm pretty sure he survived because he was in the shoulder. But I honestly, once people get arrested or things happen like that, I move on. You know, I don't ever look back into those cases, see what ended up happening. Did this guy get prosecuted? This guy not get prosecuted? Did he get a plea deal? You know, he went to the hospital. Did he survive? Did he not survive? That was the job of the detectives and everybody else. So that was the extent. Those are the only times I've ever had come close to discharging my weapon, though. Well, there was one other time. I was training a rookie, and we found a open door. It was an alarm call to a store, and we found an open door, and we decided to search it. And our training led us to one would go one way and one would go the other way on the outside, meet on the other side, and then work our way into the middle. And as I was getting close to where I was supposed to meet him, this guy thought it'd be a brilliant idea to cut across the store and try to scare me. And he nearly found himself dead. Just leave it at that. He didn't scare me. I saw the gun coming up out of the side of a corner, and I raised mine up, and I mean, I was very close. I realized it was him, and so I didn't. But he had his gun in his hand, just because procedures when we're clearing a building, you're supposed to have your gun in your hands. You have it out holstered. Now it's supposed to be in front of you. He had it kind of down into the side of him, and that's the first thing I saw coming around the corner. But I recognized the uniform. But yeah, he came close that day. I told him, I reprimanded him, and he ended up getting in some serious trouble for that. But yeah, those are the only times. And I am glad that those are the only times, man. I've had other officers discharge their weapon and take the life of somebody multiple times. That's happened with our department. And it's rough on the officers too. It's not like, oh yeah, hey, you know, we just took the life of this guy, scumbag or not, let me go eat dinner. You know, it's not like that. Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, Xana, that's the order. If they weren't collateral, he would have killed Ethan first. That's a good possibility. That makes sense. ABC 7 Chicago also reported that the DoorDash was contactless and left at the front door. This is very important. Write it down. Yes. So I've had somebody contact me claiming to be involved or know the, I'm not going to tell you which one it is. I know what it is. I'm just not going to say it, but involved with the area of potentially the DoorDasher. And from what I understand is, yeah, there was no contact made between the DoorDasher and Xana. It was left there. But there might be something there, though. They may have seen something, maybe the Elantra, maybe the person inside of it, maybe not a great look, maybe not a recognizable look, where they could say, hey, yeah, no, I know that guy. Not before the murders, at least. But, I mean, before the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, that is. I don't know if it's true, though. You know, I haven't been able to prove it and just have claims. But I got some pretty strong ones and pretty strong information, given personal information of things, phone numbers, addresses, names, stuff like that. And so I find it somewhat credible, but not to the point where I'm willing to say, hey, this is what happened. But yeah, from what I've heard, it was contactless. Let's see. All right, Wanderer, let me see. I'll try this real quick. All right. I do have a thought. I haven't heard many talk about remember at the beginning it was released that Bryan Kohberger's mother is a huge advocate against the death penalty. That's true. I think he had a hatred for his mother, men who murdered women outside of partner domestic violence, and one way or another were abused by their mothers. The ultimate way to piss your mother off. I believe he wanted to get arrested, leaving the only one thing to see is if the police cadets He wanted to get arrested by leaving only one thing to see if police cadets Martin, and I do believe he believes he can outsmart the prosecution and jury. Okay, so I don't know about him leaving things on purpose to see if he gets caught and to do this to his mom. I mean, it sounds like he has no feelings for his parents. I mean, he even said that about his dad, that he feels like he's an asshole because of how he treats him. He knows he should treat him better, but he just doesn't do it. And so, maybe. What's up, Jay Turkey? Yes, sir. We're going to be playing some Fortnite tonight. Daniel, go watch a clip of UFC Hammer Fist highlights and imagine a K-bar in their hand. You'll realize those kids didn't have a chance. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, once I knew it was a knife, but I know a lot of people say, oh, there's 4 of them. Ethan's bigger and taller. And a weapon is a huge neutralizer and an advantage for the person carrying it. I mean, it doesn't matter how big you are. Let's see. Just kind of go through this real quick. Thank you for sharing. Can't imagine it would be easy to make that decision. Nah, man, I knew one guy that I knew personally very close that made that choice. He arrived at a domestic violence situation. He was a motorcycle officer, and as he pulled up, the perpetrator walked out and had a handgun and started shooting towards the officer. The officer dropped the bike, and you could see. I think no, actually the perpetrator walked out with a gun, and I think he was pointing it at I almost said his name. I don't want to dox anybody, but he's pointing it at the other officer, and he dropped the bike and pulled out his weapon and discharged it and took the man's life. But you can see where when he pulled the gun, he shot right about maybe 10 feet in front of him, about 15 feet in front of him, about 25 feet in front of him, and so on. You can see the trail of where he shot till it got to the guy. And, he was highly trained. A lot of those things, especially this was his first time in a situation like that, but he was a remarkable marksman. And yet in that situation where training was, it went out the window in that situation. You can see where he became a little bit erratic. I can't say whether or not he was involved in another one, But if he was, that wasn't the case the second time or third time around. And so, the first time when you're in something like this, training goes out the window. Let's see. Oh, okay. I think he planned all this deliberately, hoping he'd get caught and believing his narcissistic mind he could win. Maybe. I often theorized, did one of the components be that he wanted to create a large case? He was being shut down by the local police department. He was losing his job as a TA for his position for PhD student, as a PhD student at WSU in criminology. He got turned down twice by local law enforcement, probably because of background issues. So his future is probably going to, as far as in law enforcement, going down the pipes. My assumption was maybe perhaps he wanted to, commit the perfect crime, but also make the local area look like fools. And, one of the ways you would have to do that is making a crime very high profile, getting a lot of people involved and watching, get eyes in the area to see their mistakes. Because he even wrote in his essay that he wanted to help and assist rural officers with forensic-based evidence, cloud-based evidence. And basically saying, when you use the term like rural cops and stuff, it's like he's basically saying these backwoods officers that don't know anything about technology, I'm here to help them. And I think he wanted people to see that. I don't think he thought far enough that maybe perhaps other agencies and experts would get involved in this case to figure out who committed the crime. But I do think that he wanted, at one point, I did think that he wants to create a high profile case. And, there's certain factors that need to be taken into that happen in most high profile cases, whether it's right or wrong. I get it. But majority of it is young, attractive, white, blonde females. And, if something happens in those scenarios where you don't expect it, in a university where on sorority row or Greek row, where there's a lot of, you're paying quite a bit to be on Greek row, to be a member of a sorority or fraternity, you're probably coming from some money. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't take 2 and 2 to connect those dots, that if you have a young, attractive girl from a wealthy family, or multiple people from wealthy families, that's going to make headlines. All right. And the more you have in there and the more unsolved it is, the bigger the headline's going to be. And so I thought that could have played a role in what was going on, but that's just based on my thoughts 100%. Nothing in with proof or anything like that. He didn't want to get caught, or he would have eventually left evidence. The knife sheath was a fatal accident. I agree with that one. I do think that the knife sheath was an accident. All righty, guys. Well, we have hit the hour and a half mark. I want to thank everybody that's still here with us. I want to say, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. When the more information about the Frank's hearing comes out in the Bryan Kohberger case, we'll be talking more about it. I do have an interview I'm hoping to get out there in the near future, in referencing the Idaho case. So I would highly recommend hitting that subscribe button and ringing that notification bell so you're notified if and when that interview happens. If it does, it's going to be big, real big. And we've been in talks for a minute, and it looks like it's possibly going to end up finally going down. And also don't forget, we're probably going to start touching on the Karen Reed case, getting our, looking into that case and seeing, was she framed? Was it a mistake? Was it an accident? Was it intentional? What happened in that case? There's going to be quite a bit of hearings pulling up, or the trial's fixing to start at the beginning of the year. So please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You guys have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. And until next time, I'll probably be back on Friday. So till then, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.